Good afternoon, some listeners.
Good afternoon.
So this is our second coaching session that we had, and let's just start by going back and reflecting a little bit of our first session and some of the suggestions or strategies that we have talked about or you may have thought about, and we'll get started, okay?
Okay. I took some of the notes that you gave me from last time, and I looked at creating a PBL project that was focused on one of the things you said was about the speakers and bringing speakers in. And so I've looked at it, and I created a PBL that was specifically, with civics and focused on voting rights and voting issues. So.
All right. So let's. What would be our main topic for this if we want to dive down and get specific with it?
Okay. Civic engagement on local, state, all the different levels of government. Sometimes our students get caught up on the big issues because that's what they hear about all the time. But I want them to understand also that our state issues affect them as well as local issues like health or water usage. And so I really wanted to kind of pare down and kind of really look at those issues as well.
Okay. What would be your driving question for this particular unit?
How can civic engagement change your world?
Okay.
For the fact that I think they're kind of disengaged in the fact that they, what does voting matter? Things are going to happen regardless. And I would like for them to see that what they do can affect a wider range, on all different levels.
How do you see you getting that point across that, if they are active and engaged in voting, how do you show that to a high school kid?
Well, one of the things that I really looked at is because in November we're going to be voting on several issues locally, is that we're going to spend some time talking with different speakers, inviting speakers come in. One of the speakers that I know, or actually two, are on the Thomasville City Council. And so those who live in Thomasville might have and find out something about their town. And then we have Carrie, who is one of our board members for this school. He's involved in food drives and cooperatives. So I'd like for him to come in and talk about how they can be active and how they can vote and support like gleaning, which is when farmers finish harvesting, there's what's left over, where he has an organization that invites people to come in and it sets it up where they can get the leftover food in the fields. And so that's a kind of a cool concept of supporting people who can't afford healthy foods. And then we also have, it's really kind of cool that we have this, is one of our students, a parent, is running for a judge, and I'd like to invite her in. And that came up with a discussion with another teacher, and it was like, oh, did you know about this? And I hadn't realized that she was running. And I think that'll really kind of catch their students' imagination a little bit. Also, the fact that they'll realize, oh, this is somebody we know, and look what they do. And so that I think will kind of pull them in.
So how do you see bringing in this particular person and not being considered biased? Because regardless is a judge, which is a partisan position. How do you see you playing that?
Luckily, because I kind of thought about that, in the discussion with the teacher, she said, well, she knows her opponent. And so if we had 1 week the parent and the other week have her opponent, and so that they could ask questions, but not have it like a debate, but more like just a discussion of their points of view. So they could see 2 people doing the same job or running for the same position, but how they're different. Is it along party lines, or is it just along their beliefs? Right. So, and that pulls straight into, as we talk about the Supreme Court and we talk about the different justices, why the president picking a justice is such a big deal.
So how do you see yourself getting kids engaged and excited about talking about how maybe President Trump and his decision on whoever who selects or finally is appointed? Mm-hmm. How do you feel like you can get them really engaged and excited about that?
Well, one of the things what I would like to do is in the November, because of the elections, I would like to run a mock election, but have as an initial assignment is that they have to pick a particular issue and do a pro and a con. So it can't be, I'm just for this. It's not propaganda, but they have to understand that they have to weed through a lot of fake news or a lot of opinion. And then when it comes down to, where's the fact, or is this just opinion? And I think that will help. Well, one, they're going to have to be really on top of things, and they're going to have to figure out what their resources are. They reliable, kind of reliable, or is it just purely propaganda that somebody's putting out? And that's another issue that our students face is they've got so much information coming at them that they don't necessarily take the time to critically think about it. It's all about, that's what so-and-so said.
So how do you see, how do you see proving a point that something is biased or not biased when a lot of times it's going to be based on the individual's set of morals, values, or beliefs?
Right. Well, this is where, because we are just really talking about the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, and the Constitution, we're really going to be looking at, what makes it right for Americans or the American government. So we'll be able to get into a lot of the court cases, but also some of the stuff with just really having to evaluate and look at and say, what did they experience in their lives that would make them feel this way? Or is it truly just based on science? And where does science fit in? Because some people believe climate change isn't really happening as air conditioning prices go up and everything else goes down. But what makes an issue an issue? Mm-hmm. So I think that's going to be a challenge. But our students have really been able to look at lots of different issues over time.
Do you have any court cases particularly in mind that you may use for this?
Well, with environmentalism, there's lots of cases out there. Also, when we're discussing political parties, stuff like the Electoral College, Bush versus Gore, how does that go about? Well, why did we choose the Electoral College instead of, straight democracy or direct democracy? And then that way it'll pull back into, hopefully reinforce vocabulary, but also give them an understanding of why popular vote doesn't always mean, that's who becomes president.
So with politics and big issues comes big feelings. Mm-hmm. How do you see yourself handling that?
Well, I want them to understand that it's I don't want to say just the facts, but that everybody can be seen as a hero and everybody can be seen as a villain, depending on what your point of view is, and that they are going to have to kind of weed through to figure it out. I kind of would like to pull in some Socratic seminars throughout the semester, especially when it comes to those touchy subjects, because the Socratic seminar is set up that you are just presenting your viewpoint. It is not, you have to have it based on fact, but it is not, you're not debating. There's not a right and a wrong. It's just, this is my feelings about it. And then they can kind of, because they've used it in English classes before, I know these kids can have a discussion without it turning into an argument or spilling over into the cafeteria or wherever.
Right, so what would be some of the main goals of the unit that you would have? Besides, I know you've touched a little bit on civic engagement, but maybe if we break it down a little bit more, maybe into segments.
Okay. For example, one of the goals is to analyze the roles of citizens. So I would definitely want to look at how citizenship has changed over time, why citizenship has changed, why has the different amendments occurred, because women could vote or couldn't vote, and now they can. What has been added, and what were the things that kind of lit the fire for that particular thing as well. Another is looking at what's your right as a citizen. So looking at the Bill of Rights, looking again at the Constitution and what gives us those rights. And then what are your responsibilities? Do you just take for granted that you're given all these rights, or should you do something about it? And who do you stand up for, or what do you go into standing up for? The other is really a hot topic is immigration, because it's such a hot topic. I'd like for them to be able to trace, immigration through time. I know that they've had some experiences with the 1890s immigrations and exclusion acts through American history, but I'd also like, how has immigration changed, and why are different populations, and how no matter what type of immigrant, there was always some prejudice or bias against them, depending on, the time period. And so that they understand it's not just one population that's always looked at, it's just whoever is the economic or social threat at some points.
So that's a good point. So I'm wondering what it would look like if you could actually maybe break down voting by demographics, even religion, and just to see which way people tend to lean. I'm wondering if that would be maybe a piece that would be an interesting starter for you.
Yeah. Actually, one of the things that I wanted to look at is the idea, and to see also to kind of test where they are in their history, about the Solid South, and have a discussion about when were we Democrats as a Southern state, and when did it change that all of a sudden we're Republican, or what was going on, or what were the things that changed that. So it would be kind of cool to look at the mathematics behind it, the stats. I was able to find on one website the last 3 presidential slides. And another step that I would like to see, or would be really cool, I don't know if we could pull it off, is have a mock election here. And so when we look at the Davidson County stats and look at the Valley stats to see if they would actually, make it, or is it totally opposite because of our different populations. So
I think that would be interesting. I really do. So let's talk about, at this point we've talked about goals. Let's talk about what's the reality of being able to get all this done in the time period that we have.
Okay. Well, I think with the setup and the students that I have, they're taking college classes and things of that nature. So I've got to be aware that I'm not the only class. But I also think that if I kind of do it right and give them small steps, that it'll kind of take on its own because they are passionate about certain issues. So I've got to figure out what issues and then go from there. I know that I can get speakers. I know that we could set up a Google poll for mock election, but I think most of it is doable. It's just going to have to be really timed out right. So.
Talk to me a little bit more about how you see that mock election going, how you would set it up.
I would like for them to be poll workers. So the students that I have would be responsible for manning the polls, making sure voter fraud wasn't happening, making sure, and then really have it set up with Chromebooks. So there's a technical piece and give them an idea of how a real poll would work.
So how do we do voter fraud in the high school?
Well, and that's something that we kind of have to think about is do we have a student who comes in first period and then comes in second period and then comes in third period because they might have different poll workers, or how do we go about that? And then so that's something they'll have to be explored. So.
All right, so we've talked a little bit about our goals, some of the realities. I know we've talked a little about, but I want to go to the chart here behind us.
Okay.
And I want to talk about things since our last session, and including up to this point, things that we could either let go. We know, hey, it's not going to work. It's got to go down the river.
Okay.
Things here in the grass that we know are obtainable. And then we're going to go up to things that in the mountains that are attainable, but maybe a little bit harder.
Okay.
And then pie in the sky.
Okay.
You had everything you wanted. You can go there. So I want you to take a minute, think about it, and then write down a few things, and then we'll review it and talk about it.
Okay. With the pie in the sky, I would love for us to have some of our students actually be poll workers, but that would be there would be some things that wouldn't quite work out. Another, I think we can set up a mock election. It would be really cool if we could sponsor a debate. I'm going to have to let go of possibly some of the extra stuff. So maybe look at letting go of like paring down issues, some of the issues, because I think it'll get more complicated. think the Socratic seminar will be a little bit harder because I am going to have to be careful, and but it's doable. And there is a website where if we have a mock election, we can actually put our stats in. But I have to make sure that
Well, let's start. I think we got a good list to start with, and what I'd like to talk about now is let's go through this. I think keep this up, kind of give you a kind of idea through the PBL process of what we're looking at and when we get started. So let's start with we're going to let go some of the details and issues. Let's pair. What are we talking about here?
like because of time. I'm gonna have to have 3 or 4 issues instead of just saying anything that you want, because there'll be some that either I know are so hot topic that may cause hard feelings, or just so that they can really delve into a couple of the really important issues of the time and let them choose within reason, but not everything about every election.
Okay, so we're talking about attainable. We'll start with speakers. I know we've talked briefly a little bit, but maybe kind of revisit that.
I really want to look at just the speakers that are important to the issues that they choose, so that it's not just they don't know where they're coming from, or I have to have a briefing before every speaker. I want to be able to kind of let them go through and choose ahead
And then my collection.
I think it'll be obtainable. The only thing I might have to do is look at the website. I think Davidson County actually gives a list of all the issues, and so that I could actually get that and then kind of type that up as a Google form, or get someone to do a Google form for it.
So, are you thinking my collection with just your civics class, or we do the whole school?
We'll do it school wide. Okay. So that's where we would have a bigger
we go up into the mountains, and we'll start with Socratic seminars. What do you see maybe leading that seminar with?
Okay, yeah, if we've had a speaker about food, health issues with food, we could go in and talk about disease, health care, and that would be a really big topic with government-supported health care compared to private health care and how they feel about it. And so that might be, is it a right or is it not? And I know with the different things with the 2 different presidencies, how their views are different. It'd be good to see how students feel about that.
So I hear your topics. I love Socratic seminars, but then how do we lead them effectively for high school students when everybody's getting a voice?
Okay. One of the things that I want to look at is I've seen the whole idea is putting your 2 cents in. Is that they have the questions ahead of time, and so they can get their facts together, and it's not just I don't like it because my mama said it's, that they have their ideas together, and that I can monitor how many times they talk to help go in with a rubric, but not what they talk about, but that there has been some input in. So I thought about going through, and for each topic, they have to have, like, give them 2 pennies, and so they at the end they put their 2 cents in, and then set up ahead of time what are the rules about it.
So when we go down, when we're talking about the website and stats, tell me what you're referring to.
Okay.
Why is that going to be harder than maybe some of the other things?
Just registration, making sure that we have what we need, and it won't be that hard, but it would be a nice layer to put on our mock election, because I think I could talk some students into writing an article about how Valley feels about the issues and have it that way, especially if we talk about school budgets. There might be some opinions.
And that was going to be, I was wondering, what type of stats are we going to use?
Yeah, like maybe even who votes, not have names obviously, but have male, female, because one of the things as I was doing some research for this is that we have more female voters, registered voters in our county than we do male voters, by like 5,000 more. And you wouldn't think that, but when you look at it, when it's broken down by area, and I've got a website, and I'm going to show them that. I'm going to say, well, why is that? Is it because there's more women, or is it because they are more actively engaged, or is it, just is it because women live longer, so they've got more voters that way? And so we could look at some of that stuff, and then look at the amount of voting, registered voters from an area you're from. Like, is the northern part of the county tend to have more voters than the southern part of the county? So that'd be kind of a neat. And then that can pull back into, go all the way back to the Articles of Confederation, is do you vote by population or by representation? So,
very, very interesting. And then when you go pie in the sky, so when we talk about working a poll, talk to me about that process and what that would take.
Yeah, if we had some students who were interested and you've got like age, and you've got, could they go for the training, can they do this, all that stuff. But I would love to see a couple of students, get involved and become active enough that they're like, yeah, I would like to be a poll worker for one of the local elections. So, but that's more of logistics.
Is there an age requirement for that?
I'm pretty sure there is, and that's something I'm definitely having to find out.
Which would probably be okay with seniors being late.
But I know several of our students that are, and it depends if it was earlier or did they just turn. Do you have to be 18, at the training or whatever? And then sponsor a debate. That would be awesome, but that would be something I would have to really work with, and they would have to get really excited about, and who they would have to choose who they would want to see in a debate, because I'm not even sure at this point all of the candidates.
Are we talking about local government?
Local. We've got a couple. I think we've got a couple of even school board members that are up for. So that would be really interesting to see that.
So I did this again just so it's a helpful reminder when we're thinking through the process. We've got all levels, and hopefully we can get pie in the sky with that.
Well, yeah, and what I like about this is that because we talked about it, even the pie in the sky doesn't seem as unlikely as I thought about it before.
Okay, so as we've talked through this, do you see anything that we could add, take away, move, or are we good where we're at?
Um, yeah, actually, after we've discussed them, I know these two probably come down here. But, and even the poll, maybe, to come down to one. But the debate, I'm still, that's would be a lot of work. And I don't know about Tom. But it could happen.
So let's move into, let's talk a little bit about what our options are here as we move forward, especially after talking about this. And let's try to really get into the unit and see what we can work through.
All right. We talked about the key knowledge, and that's just from our standard course of study. But some of the other skills that I really want to work on with students is, looking at communication, how they communicate, how others communicate, and then increasing awareness of economic and political, social issues, and then that's going to pull in more with collaboration, because it'll be a lot harder for them to do research just by themselves. But if they're all working on it, Bob might say, well, I found this really good article about this. It's not going to help me, but it might help you. So trying to create an atmosphere of collaboration as well. And because the big question is changing the world, hopefully they're going to look at what does citizenship mean to them, and then actually have them going through it and becoming active for something, or at least, the very least, is knowing that they can vote and what their vote means and why they shouldn't take it for granted. Good. Because with the rubrics and stuff, because you always have to have grades, I thought a couple of the smaller parts of the project would be to have a pro-con on an issue and set it up as, specifically a rubric that looks at not only the writing a little bit, because communication's a big thing, but also, did they take the time to research their resources? Because of, as we've discussed, fake news compared to opinions compared to fact base. And then as a team, look at a survey. And so before we do an election, survey students about who votes or who would vote, and then see if kind of straw poll a little bit. Did you vote the way you thought? Did something change your mind? What happened before and after? Okay.
So I'm wondering what would be some things that would change their mind.
Yeah, I mean, did their favorite rapper say something that made them go, that's okay, that sounds good, or did they watch, a really important something about an important issue like a documentary, or was something discussed in class? Did that make them have a different perspective? So
going back to the word bias, as we talked about.
Yeah. Or how facts were presented. Mm-hmm. So, and also, I think it would be kind of cool to bring in looking at the different amendments. Mm-hmm. Who could vote? Would this, if this population was taken out, would have changed a vote? And probably at some point I would like to let them look at the Rock the Vote website, which is, in my opinion, biased, because they have it very much like they list North Carolina as slacker, and they have some really interesting things to say about North Carolina and its voting because of the voter ID, that stuff. So I would kind of, I'd like for them to see how people look at us, or don't look at us, maybe that's right. And then they could even have a debate about voting age. Do you think 16-year-olds should be able to vote? And what might change with that? But yeah, I like the idea. I know it's not completely fleshed out, but there are some really good things, I think.
So let's move into our last section as we've talked about, what our topics, our goals, the reality of doing it, the options, and as we wrap up, let's try to formulate a plan, definitely of concrete, what we want to get accomplished, and more importantly, how do we get there?
Okay. Well, I'm definitely going to be contacting and getting the speakers arranged. I know that our students are savvy enough to come up with the surveys and the mock election ballot once we figure out what issues we want to concentrate on. And if I look at it and I look at my time, if I'm spending just a little bit of time each week, then by November they should be way ready. And then afterwards, it's going to be a matter of giving them all the information, and stats, and saying, okay, what are you going to be able to do with this? So
I'm wondering, when you say students are savvy enough to come up, I'm wondering what that may look like.
Okay, with a Google form, I should say technology savvy enough to create a Google form, because that's the whole purpose of the first 9 weeks is with this would be to set it up so that they would, by that very end, they would know enough about the issues that their questions aren't biased.
Right.
It's sometimes it's not what you're asking, it's how you ask it. So that's something else we would have to look at, and pull in maybe an English teacher, and I thought about also pulling in if we do POB with CTE. Sorry, that's a lot of initials, but have that because some of their stuff goes in with this as well.
So I'm wondering what you would do with the English teacher when we go back to that.
Have the English teachers look at their surveys, or have a set of kids look at the surveys and go, all right, why did you use, challenging? Why did you use, horrific? Isn't that loaded? And because I know that they do propaganda, I think that would be a good way for them to use that skill without saying, oh, this is a worksheet or this is an activity. It's, I need for you to help this class. And that also brings in, when we look at authentic audience, if they know students are checking their work, maybe they'll be less likely to put something in there that they know they would get caught on. They spend a little more time revising and going through the process.
What about principles of business?
With the principles of business, it's a math. There's some math in it to look at. How do you present yourself? how do you do presentations? And our students do well with presentations, but maybe even when they talk about an issue, to give them a different audience, let them talk to that particular class. And
so on this last part, let's I guess maybe on a sheet of paper, let's maybe get a timeline.
Okay.
First of all, we know what our duration is, or our projected duration, and then kind of work through that.
Okay. I can use. Yeah. Well, if I look at, because we start so early in August, I have a little more time than maybe traditional teachers. In August, work on looking at of course, the speakers. And don't make me do the months out loud.
October.
There you go.
November.
Thank you. All right. So in September, start looking at issues. And this is along with, the big ideas with the class.
Right.
And with the big event with the citizenship in August and September as well. And then the surveys in October. And the election at the beginning. Because of our limited time in class, because of the hybrid class, definitely, they will have to come out of class time and have discussions and set up some Google shared documents so that they work together, and that I can monitor that as well. It's not just they're out on their own. I want to be able to give feedback so that if they start going off on a tangent, I can go bring them back in.
So, any potential roadblocks besides class time obviously being an issue that you may see through this project?
I don't really see too many roadblocks with it. Except the day of the election. How are we going to get 200 students through here? And are we going to look at absentee ballots or pre-voting? And then that'll bring another aspect in, because so many of our students are off campus. Do we want to give them the opportunity to participate, or is it, hey, you're here, that's who we get? So that'll be one roadblock. For security, you don't want to open the Google form up to just anybody. And you don't want to get their information, because I know you can, with the Google form, set it up that way, but I want to keep it as real as possible and as anonymous as possible.
That would be, I'm wondering what that would look like with absentee voting. How we would do that in the high school.
Yeah, that would be something the students would have to figure out. But I think because of their experiences, they may have a little more insight of when and where they could do that, even more than I would. So, but I would like to get as many voters as possible so that our stats are representative.
So as we wrap up, I'm just wondering any clarifying questions for me, or any outstanding issues that we may have before we wrap up the session. I feel like we've established a good timeline. We've talked our way through the process, and I think we've reflected upon it. Anything that I may be able to help clarify for you? Do you think this is, a good PBL? I do, and I think it's, we're talking about obviously a long period, but it also intertwines through multiple disciplines and standards. I think the timeline for me is probably the biggest thing. And then we'll always go back to the chart. Can we obtain everything that we want to get?
Okay.
Okay. Well, I thank you for your time.
Well, thank you.